going inside the issues of our community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
After 134 years of preparing men and women to be rabbis, educating people of all religious backgrounds in scripture and theology, and preserving the most important documents from the American Jewish experience, Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati faces a real threat. Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. The current recession has placed many businesses and institutions under severe strain. This past week, officials at Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, announced that the college is facing a $3 million deficit this year and as much as $8 million over the next 2 years. One option for dealing with the challenge would be to close one or two of the 3 U.S. campuses. Hebrew Union College opened in Cincinnati in 1875, the first permanent Jewish institution of higher learning in the New World. In 1922, Rabbi Stephen Wise founded the Jewish Institute of Religion in New York City. The two institutions merged in 1950. A West Coast campus was opened in Los Angeles in 1954, and a branch in Jerusalem was opened in 1963. Too few Cincinnatians may appreciate the place of Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in Cincinnati's history, or the role of Cincinnati in American Jewish history. For some context, here is part of a report I prepared 12 years ago. Among the tens of thousands of immigrants who flooded into Cincinnati in the 1830s and 40s were thousands of German Jews. These early Cincinnati Jewish families served as the foundation for what eventually became known as Reform Judaism. The spark for that movement was the arrival of Rabbi Isaac Mayer Wise in 1854, whose optimistic pragmatism struck a responsive chord in American society.
He built the Plum Street Temple, this monument to optimism, a place that seated 1,200 people at a time when the congregation was about 300 in size.
Wise was the center of all the fundamental organizations that spurred Reform's growth. He edited the Israelite, America's oldest English-language Jewish newspaper.
This also gave him, in effect, a national pulpit.
And most importantly, he founded Hebrew Union College. Beginning in 1875 in cramped rooms in the basement of the Mound Street Temple, Wise prepared young rabbis who carried and elaborated the culture of reform throughout the United States. The legacy of Wise and his fellow Cincinnati reformers gives Cincinnati a unique place in the history of American and even world Judaism.
Very few, even much larger communities, have the kind of ongoing impact and certainly the historical impact on the larger world that Cincinnati has had in American Jewish life. To discuss the challenges facing Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, I am joined this morning by Rabbi Kenneth Ehrhart. Rabbi Ehrhart is a graduate of Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, a member of the faculty as Director of Homiletics, and is currently the Dean of the Cincinnati campus. Welcome to Newsmakers.
Thank you, Dan.
Try to give a brief overview in terms of a history. That's my approach to the world. But talking about the institution today, how many students, what's sort of the range, how would you describe this institution that you are the dean of one part of?
Well, we're a relatively small institution. I mean, we have about 400 to 500 full-time enrolled students. We're a graduate institution. We accept only college graduates. We serve every aspect and every facet of the Jewish community, the Reformed Jewish community. We train rabbis, we train cantors, we train scholars, and I'll get back to that in just a moment. We train communal workers and educators. The scholars we train are not just of the Jewish community. The scholars in the graduate school in Cincinnati are right now, we've given half of the PhDs since our founding in 1950. Half of the PhD recipients have been Christian scholars.
Yeah, and I think I'm Roman Catholic by background, and my wife educated as a theologian. I'm very aware of that, but I think it's one of those things that people wouldn't recognize. And I think some of that, when you look at your literature, I encourage people to look at your website, talk about sort of the open pluralistic approach of Reform Judaism. Right. And I think that's really part of the character of this institution.
Right. As a Reform Jewish institution, we share, Reform Judaism was a product of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was the same movement that gave rise, of course, to the Declaration of Independence. So as a Reformed Jewish institution, we look at education, the principle of education, as the common pursuit of truth, which means that nothing is really outside of, nothing is prohibited from studying, and it encourages study with other faith traditions. Other faith traditions, I believe, well, because of our history, other faith traditions have not only taken advantage of that, but have come to us, flocked to us, because of that attitude and that approach to study of Bible and religion, etc.
Given that, is there there's just 4 campuses. Are all 4 campuses essentially the same, or does what you do in Cincinnati have a distinctive quality? What happens in Los Angeles has a different focus?
Yeah.
How is this organized?
Yeah, the only school that is academic program that is common to all of the 3 American campuses. Jerusalem is a little bit different. But the only program that is common to the 3 American campuses is the rabbinical school. There is a full rabbinical school here in Cincinnati, in New York, and in Los Angeles. Beyond that, each of the campuses has unique academic programs. So here in Cincinnati, we're the only campus with a full School of Graduate Studies. Cincinnati is also the home of the Clow Library, which is the largest Judaica library and the most comprehensive in the Western Hemisphere. We're the home of the American Jewish Archives. There are branches on other campuses, but nowhere nearly as big and as comprehensive as the library and the archives here. In New York, we have a School of Sacred Music where we train cantors. And in Los Angeles, we have a School of Education where we train Jewish educators, and a School of Communal Service where we train Jewish communal workers. We also have developed partnerships with other academic institutions. Los Angeles has an ongoing partnership with the University of Southern California. We are, in effect, the Judaic Studies Department of the University of Southern California. And here in Cincinnati, we have very, very long-standing relations with the University of Cincinnati, and we are now in negotiations to expand that further. And we're very proud to announce that we just began an association with Xavier University.
Well, this was something I was going to get to, because in this discussion about the potential of closing 1 or 2 of these campuses, the Los Angeles campus has made a lot of the point that this connection with USC. Is the relationships that you've just hinted at, mentioned with University of Cincinnati, with Xavier University, are they of the type that helps address the financial challenge that you're facing
Not
right
really.
now?
Not really. The relationship with the University of Cincinnati and Xavier University, while there is some financial benefit to the institution, really is on an academic level. It enriches the rabbinical school, excuse me, it enriches the graduate school, and of course it enriches the educational offerings at both Xavier and the University of Cincinnati. There are other sources of income that are unique to Cincinnati, however.
For example?
Well, the Jewish Foundation of Cincinnati, for example. Hebrew Union College is received one of the largest grants from the Jewish Foundation of Cincinnati. I guess it's no secret, a $6.5 million grant, which enabled us to move ahead with the renovation of the Clow Library. The Mayerson Foundation, other Jewish foundations, the Jewish Federation of Cincinnati has been a consistent supporter. And most important is the corporate community of Cincinnati. The corporate community of Cincinnati has supported us consistently and at a level that cannot be paralleled, or has not been paralleled, in New York or Los Angeles.
And I want to make clear that when you say the corporate community, it's not just the corporate community that might in some way be identified with the Jewish community.
Oh, no.
It is really much broader than that.
Yeah, I mean, you can go down the list of the corporate community and look at the people, men and women we have honored in our annual dinners.
Tom Cody, Tom and Mary Ellen
Tom
Cody,
Cody,
just
Kevin,
last month.
That's right. Kevin Cabot at Fifth Third. Western Southern Life, Procter & Gamble. I mean, you can go U.S. Bank, you can go down and down the list.
So when an institution is facing the sort of financial issues that it is, you're saying that one of the things Cincinnati has is that there's this very deep set of philanthropic support here in the city that Now, obviously in New York, you're in the center of the financial district, you're in the center of a lot of the foundations of the country. I would think they would have a very strong argument. And also a larger Jewish community, but is it really, what balances these three out? Is Los Angeles the odd person out here?
No. No.
What's going on?
I think what makes this so very difficult, if we indeed do have to close one or two of the campuses, what makes this so very difficult is that there is no clear, logical choice as to which city, where the college makes the biggest impact. We're very proud of the impact we've made in Cincinnati and the support we receive from the Cincinnati community. New York also receives considerable support from the Jewish community in New York, not so much from the corporate, but from the Jewish community in New York. That is, after all, where most of the major Jewish foundations are located. Los Angeles receives considerable support from the University of Southern California. And joint programs with the University of Southern. So it's not easy to walk away from any of these.
So, given that, one of the arguments then that I've heard some people talking about this week is that since when you're talking about New York, Los Angeles, the two coastal cities, Cincinnati could possibly make the argument it's less expensive to operate here. And is that true?
Yeah, I don't think
is that an argument?
I don't think there's any question about it. Cincinnati has a 19-acre campus. We have the facilities, we have the library, we have the archives. The cost of living in Cincinnati is considerably lower than in New York or Los Angeles, New York especially. It's about 40% lower for a student, less expensive for a student 40%. To live here. I think that's what the statistics are. So Cincinnati has on its side the economics. That's very clear.
How long have you and other administrators known that some sort of crisis, some sort of hard decisions were coming up? I mean, was this something that has sort of jumped to the forefront because of the economic situation, or are there underlying structural issues that this has been perking for some time?
There have been some underlying structural issues. We have seen administrative and academic redundancies, and we were taking measures to address those. For example, using distance learning rather than hiring adjunct faculty at all the institutions, and we had lowered the budget. But we are now faced with, as all academic, we're now faced with the perfect storm. And the drop of the endowment, the drop in the annual fundraising, the drop of what's called MUM dues, that is the maintenance of union membership, the contributions we receive from the 900 plus Reform congregations throughout the country, the congregational structure that Isaac Mayer Wise created. Right. That had accounted for over a third of our income every year. That contribution is down almost $2 million this year and may stay. $2 million from roughly $13.5 million. So that may stay the same for several years to come. It's a perfect storm, if you can speak of it in that way. So while we were addressing some structural redundancies, no one anticipated this kind of storm. When
faced with this, can the Cincinnati community, can the Cincinnati leadership go out and solicit support gifts that will support the Cincinnati part of this, or does it have to go to the total institution?
You know, deans, provosts, presidents, board members will tell you, and it's absolutely true, what an institution needs more than anything is unrestricted income. Right. Even in this day and age, endowments, so many endowments are underwater that we can't touch the endowment income. So what we will be doing for the next few years during this financial crisis is seeking unrestricted income, the kind of income,
unrestricted operating income,
the very kind of income that the corporate community of Cincinnati has been so generous in donating in the past.
We're just about out of time, but when is a decision going to be made? What kind of time frame are we looking at, and who makes the decision?
Great question. The decision will be made at the June board meeting at the end of June. I believe it's June 23rd. That will be a board meeting in New York. and the decision will be made by the Board of Governors. Ultimately, a decision to close one or more campuses is a decision on the board level. Now, the president may make recommendations and observations, but ultimately it will be a board decision.
And do you think the decision will be made at that meeting, or could it be postponed?
I don't think it can be postponed. I think
It's that serious.
I think the economics demand that we address it now.
So there's a very short time frame for people who believe in and want to support the institution here in Cincinnati to make a difference.
Unfortunately, there is, yes.
Very good. Thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you, Dan.
Helping explain this, and good luck with all of this. I want to speak personally about, as a historian, the American Jewish Archives is an incredible presence to have in this city. So the Marison Center, I mean, all of this. So something needs to happen.
Well, we consider ourselves part of the family in Cincinnati.
That you are.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. Just in time for Earth Day 2009, SORTA introduced 6 new hybrid buses to its fleet.
So go green, leave your car keys at home, and go Metro.
The benefits of hybrid buses are multiple. Obviously, there's the carbon footprint component, but there's so many other benefits that will accrue to our community. The buses are quieter. They don't rumble quite as loudly through the city streets.
Welcome back. It is easy to talk about the need for somebody, somewhere, to do something about global warming, our carbon imprint on the environment, and America's dependence on Middle Eastern oil. But talk is cheap. It is only when we, as individuals and as members of businesses, civic organizations, and government units, do something that change occurs. By putting 6 hybrid buses into service on Earth Day this past week, SORTA and Metro took a meaningful step towards a different future. To talk about the new hybrids in the fleet and what it means, I am joined now by Marilyn Shazor, the Chief Executive Officer, of Southwest Ohio Regional Transit Authority, SORTA, which operates Metro. Marilyn, welcome back to Newsmakers.
Thank you, and good morning.
Well, this is pretty exciting. As a owner of a hybrid vehicle who wanted to make the commitment, to have something this big that is hybrid, a bus that is this big. Talk to me a little bit. What does it cost to buy a hybrid bus versus a traditional diesel-powered bus, and how do you figure the cost-benefit analysis here?
We're really excited about the hybrid vehicles in our fleet, Dan. In terms of costs, they're about $170,000 more than a regular diesel vehicle, but we do get the return over the lifespan of the vehicle, which is 12 years. So previously, with the fuel cost being much lower, we would not have seen that because the fuel cost increased so much. Now we know we can get the return on the investment, and it's a means for us to be able to do the right thing to take the first step towards protecting the environment.
Now, in a city with a geography like Cincinnati's, which has got lots of hills, lots of valleys, I could see if we were in Chicago or we were in Florida someplace where everything's flat.
Right.
But was that a consideration here? How efficiently, how effectively do these operate in this environment?
It has been a consideration and will continue to be. We will not make the entire fleet hybrid because, as you said, the topography of Cincinnati does not make that make sense for us. So we will put the vehicle in service on those routes and in those communities where it is most efficient and most effective.
So these first 6, where do you expect these to be in regular use?
The first 6 we're going to put everywhere because we want everybody to experience them and everyone to see them. So we're actually going to filter them throughout the fleet. Excuse me. In the future, though, as we bring more vehicles in, we will begin to make sure they're on the routes where they're most effective.
Now, one of the things that, when a person gets on one of these, if they're sort of scattered through the fleet and different routes, what would be the signal to somebody that they're on a hybrid? How would they know that?
Well, one, they look a little different. I'm sorry, the design that we have on the hybrid is a little bit different than the normal Metro vehicle. It's also quieter. They will notice that when it pulls off, it will be a much smoother ride than the typical diesel vehicle. And the noise rate reduction, of course, is the biggest thing between the diesel and the regular hybrid electric. Is just so much quieter than a normal vehicle.
Yeah, it's very hard for people to realize driving a hybrid automobile, you know, you don't even know it's on. When you're sitting at a stoplight, nothing's happening. You're not burning anything, you're not grinding anything. What kind of impact does that have? I mean, we're used to, I know you don't like this image, but we're used to seeing buses with fumes coming out of the tailpipe. Does that affect that? Does that cut that down?
Yes, it does. It will significantly reduce emissions, at least by 30%.
30%.
30% reduction in emissions. 90% reduction in emissions and 30% fuel economy. So we'll also see a 30% decrease in the amount of fuel that we consume.
So 90% cut in emissions.
Correct.
That seems like it's really big to me, because diesel vehicles can be a real problem in that sense.
Correct. Now, our vehicles, what you've noticed over the years, we've been like the leader in the use of biodiesel fuels. Started in 1993. We moved from what we used to do, which was soy diesel in the early 2000s, to what we call choice white grease in the last couple of years, because soy diesel, the price has risen because it's being used more in the food industry. So we've been the leader in biodiesel fuels in the country. We're continuing to use that. So our emissions, if it was pure diesel, you'd see that 90%, but you will still see a significant reduction in emissions, even though we're using bio.
And these vehicles, the hybrid vehicles, can use also the biofuels?
Yes, they will.
So there's a couple of ways that these are. Where are these vehicles made? Are these American-made vehicles?
They are actually being manufactured in St. Cloud, Minnesota by New Flyer, which is a manufacturer. Awesome organization. They actually, in the country this year, they said there's been a 22% increase in the number of hybrid vehicles on order from previous years, because the country wants to become more environmentally friendly, and we all want to be a part of that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of emphasis coming from the national and federal level, from the state level, for this kind of technology. So this actually could be an area where this is stimulating not the automobile industry, but the vehicle construction industry.
Correct. I agree with you. Also, for us, it's a start. It's our first step towards becoming a new organization, more environmentally conscious, more customer conscious, more customer focused, making sure that we're providing the community the best alternative that they can for transportation. One
of the things that Chris Bortz talked about at the ceremony the other day, which I didn't use, but I wanted to ask you about, was the hope that moving in these directions, and the hybrids are just part of what you're doing, will entice people from around the region to begin to join Metro, so that we can really begin to create a regional transportation system. Is that your hope? Is that where we're headed?
It is a part of what we want to do. We do hope that we will get the community more on board with mass transportation, not just because of what it can do in terms of taking people out of their vehicles, but it is a major component in terms of being able to protect the environment. Every time we put a vehicle on the road, we can take 50 automobiles off the road. That's significant when you're talking about reducing emissions into the atmosphere.
Yeah. What's the future here? Are you going to buy more vehicles, and if so, where will that funding come from? These were not purchased with the stimulus funds that everybody talks about. But are you hoping to be able to tap some of those stimulus funds in the future?
We actually, and I think we did make an announcement, received $17.5 million of stimulus funding strictly for our organization, which is formula funds that comes from the federal government. So we are using some of that to purchase some more hybrid vehicles, but also with our future bus orders, some of those will also be replaced with hybrids as well. Like I said, not the entire fleet. We actually recently did a study of our system. We had Parsons Brinkerhoff come in and tell us, based on the different types of service that we provide, what is the best type of vehicle to match that service. And that's what we're moving towards to make sure we're meeting the customer's needs.
And we're just about out of time, but how many total vehicles do you have in the fleet at any one time?
On the street at this point, if we're during school service, we have right around 350. During the summertime, that's about 325.
Okay, so this drops significantly.
Yes.
Well, this is really exciting. This sort of buying into technology, moving us to the forefront. It really is very interesting. Thank you for taking the leadership with Metro, with SORTA, and we'll have you back as we keep moving this public transit question forward.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Next week, a look at the new report for dealing with chronic homelessness. Have a good week.